So we could kick it off with just maybe seeing how things went with you guys during the week. If you guys noticed anything crazy you want to talk about, and yeah, we'll go from
Yeah,
Just
it's
feels
been
like
rough for the market. Say
there.
that.
rough is a understatement
Yeah.
of the century. Of the, I was gonna say of the century, but then like I don't know about the next bear market. It could be
Yeah,
worse.
yeah.
um, do we know if 3AC is solvent? Like,
I think they are
all right,
because we would probably know by now. If they weren't.
Yeah,
is it?
that's a terrible situation right there. Really terrible. um,
Man,
Perhaps I don't know how much detail you know around that, Dave, but maybe you could share a little bit what you know about the 3AC situation and having come from a background where you seem pretty attuned to like the VCs within the crypto space. Maybe you can talk about it a little bit.
well, I think again, like, there's gonna be certainly influencers that are talking to the actual people who interact with 3AC. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm still a little bit orbital at best, but it just the thing that really kind of shook me a little bit, honestly, not to complete the whole context, but like 3AC invests in different protocol teams, right? And so they give you, say, your seed round of $10 million,
Mm-hmm.
but they also, which is so wild to me and in retrospect so dumb, is they say, hey, we'll manage your 10 mil in our own trading accounts and we guarantee you 8% yield to the company that they invested in with the money they invested into that company. So they're
Okay.
like, and they're like, okay, so, and then most startups are like, yeah, why not let the VC who gave us their money to trade that money and give us 8% guaranteed? So everybody was like, no problem. And then they're also saying, hey, we can also market make your token, which is like a huge conflict of interest in my eyes,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then like now 3AC is ghosting everybody. So there's like quite a few startups that like literally don't have their capital right now. And you're just like sitting here just like,
And
what
the
is this?
guy who's in charge, isn't he? Like he's like a kid, right?
Well, it depends on how we qualify a kid. Um, no, looks 20s,
Under.
maybe 30s, right? Joe, whatever.
I saw a shirtless pic of him flexing and stuff in his pants. So
That certainly sounds like a
Strong
crypto
face of the
fund
company.
owner.
yeah.
But yeah, like
It's kind
that
of
to me is so wild, like
So what was the deal with the
yeah.
liquidation? How close were they? You said like $100 away.
well, actually, it looks like it was a bit of a misinformation that that specific address that had that position was mislabeled by a certain system that it was CSV, that was 3AC. But it seems like
Yeah.
this huge like STETH depegging event was actually incurred by 3AC and not strictly Celsius as like the main player. Like
Interesting.
if like people look at the data, the whales that were moving it, it was like 80% all 3AC dumping STETH, just trying to recover. Um, 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 um,
Is he
um,
frozen for you too,
um,
Ash?
um,
Yeah.
um,
Oh shit.
um,
I guess it's
um,
looping. Hold on.
um, um,
Yeah, Dave,
um,
refresh the
um,
page.
um,
That's all right. He'll pop in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
Riverside, man. Um, what's kind of interesting about what he's saying that kind of picks my brain is we know that most projects have a liquidation preference, which for those who don't know what that is, that basically ensures that the investors get their money back plus some multiple. So, if you gave them, $10 million, perhaps that liquidation preference is like a 1.1 multiple, so you get $11 million back. So it's kind of funny because what they're almost doing with that yield that they're offering is guaranteeing that they're going to at least be able to make back their liquidation preference plus some multiple, right?
Yeah, the
Um,
liquidation penalties. Like I don't know. What is it, Dave? It's like 10% at least. So you're muted. Actually, I can't hear you. I don't. Mike's not coming in.
yeah, I've actually had the same issue with Riverside with my mic before. not being able to get it.
Yeti Nano. Okay, I see that.
Mhm.
Okay, type speaking on here.
No, we had 4 viewers. Now we have 3.
Yeah, so once it starts, Mike, I'm pretty sure. But yeah,
Okay, can you hear me?
yes,
Perfect. That's
Well,
perfect.
nice.
unfortunately, this is Tim Cook's AirPods now, so not Yetis.
Damn,
Um,
Tim.
so the quality is gonna be a little bit worse. I'm gonna have to fix that.
I'll turn. Yeah, I'll just turn it down a bit. Yeah, we were just talking about liquidation.
It's not that big. It's not that big for
Okay.
let's see. It's like percentiles. So like we're not talking like, well, maybe it changed. But it's like big enough. I think usually it's around like 1% to 5%, if I remember.
Okay, no, it's reasonable.
But that's
Mm.
like spot market pricing. That's really good, right? Like that's free
Yeah.
5% if you immediately arbitrage against the current USDC, like current spot markets. So
Mhm.
that's given that you can get the transaction in before somebody else. So yeah, I mean liquidations are bad again also because it's like the more you defend, the more you're committed to defending, right? So if you defended up to 100 ETH, but you're like, no, we got to defend 200 ETH, but you still lost your 200 ETH, and you would have sat there, you're like, we could have just lost 100 ETH, like,
Right.
and kept the other 100 ETH for better pastures, right? Like it, yeah. So it's
tough.
blood in the waters.
Yeah.
But it looks like so. Apparently, they did. So one of the guys at 3AC did a Washington Post interview, just like today, or Wall Street Journal. I forgot which one. And then there was like a quote, and it was just like, "Yeah, so when Luna collapsed, their 500 something $million investment just went to zero, and they were okay with that. They were able to like sustain that loss and like be solvent and perfectly able. But the fact that Luna started dumping BTC so aggressively into the market started to put their other positions in crypto in a scary position, and that's what's causing their insolvency problems. It's that cascading event where Luna failed. In their infinite wisdom, they dumped like that much BTC back into the market, and if BTC dumps, Ethereum dumps.
Yeah, I
Celsius
didn't
goes
even know
down,
Yeah.
3AC goes down.
that popular. Like, I didn't even know it was that popular where people were tying up that much money in it, and it would fuck the entire market. I mean, it's fuck. Like,
Mm.
it's not even
You had
Ethereum or Bitcoin.
influencers on. Sorry, I just wanted to add, like, you had influencers
Yeah.
on YouTube promoting the shit out of it, right? You had, no disrespect to Lark or anybody like that, but they were big fans of Luna, and I even saw comments on YouTube where people were like, "Hey, do you still hold your position in this?" And they're like, "No, man, I got out a long time ago, like I said I did in this one video." You know what I mean? So if you miss the one video, but you happen to catch the 20 others where they're talking about it, you think it's a great investment, and then you miss the one, and it's like, damn, dang, I got cheated.
Yeah. I mean,
EVM,
yeah.
yes or no?
I don't think so.
It's
Its own thing?
Cosmos based.
Okay.
I see.
The Cosmos
I mean-
technology set like stack, which so that means I don't know anything about it then. So
It's non-EVM compatible.
yeah, because I don't think Cosmos, unless you have a module or something with Cosmos that makes it EVM compatible. Cosmos is so confusing to me. And I never tried to frankly fully understand it, but yeah, that business model where you're literally just handing out stimulus checks until hopefully they use their stimulus checks to do something productive imploded so hard with Luna. Like it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked with the previous projects.
It's so annoying that some changes crashed the entire thing. Jeez. Yeah, dude. Who- Who's actually putting money in there? God damn it.
Well, to be fair, yeah, like you offer 20%. Everybody's telling you this 20% is safe. You're not a place if you're a person who hasn't experienced the DeFi summers where the token mechanic of what they did has kind of honestly been done before, to an expression in DeFi summer. It's like, yeah, like it, you know, the part of your brain's like this is too good to be true gets more and more suppressed, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, look, there was a lot of smart people that aped into that thing, right? Like a lot of people from Delphi Capital, a lot of them lost 99% of their net worth, right? And qualify,
I just don't
would
get that. It's like a different
yeah.
chain. Would make you trust it? Like, I mean, I guess Solana has a little bit of like, I don't know.
But even Solana is now going to the gutters, right? Like at the
Yeah,
price it is, and even at the transactions, the TVL that they're seeing, and the new activity, it seems like they're kind of going sideways. That's my impression.
yeah.
Which again, that feels like a natural bull cycle fallout kind of a deal. But there definitely feels that I can feel some of the energy where some of the teams that are certainly funded are shifting back to EVM world, um, to hold themselves to this where there's still capital left, pretty much, right? So there has been teams that I'm not like very close to that seems like they're originally planning to a non EVM chain to like we'll take it all back. We're going back to EVMs. Which I don't know how much of a pivot it is for them, like cost wise, right? But it's this is bear market things. Um, we're having our detox period now. We're resetting, relearning the same old lessons we learned before, which is the reason why there's a lot of ETH maxis, Bitcoin maxis, other big these kind of coin maxis. They exist in part a reflection on the strength of some of these systems. Not to say these are great reasons to have maxis, but they exist because something inside in the kernel of these cultures actually has some strong things about it, right? So,
Imagine if you took out a huge loan of UST, though. You would have owed zero. It would have just been free money if you spent it.
that is true. That is actually, yeah. If you spent it, that's the key thing, because not a lot of people spent it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because most people just threw it into the 20% yield. If you spent it, that pretty much meant you took your loan against EST and then you immediately routed it out to USDC, right? And then later you're like, oh, I got to repay my loan. Use one USDC to buy all the tether back, and then the US Terra, and then repay your loan. That'd be like nine head gaming in crypto.
Yeah.
Wasn't this like a real thing at the beginning of DeFi where people were like taking out basically stable coins against collateral and then finding ways to keep that
To
keep that
depeg?
stable coin? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I choked.
Yeah.
That wasn't even for comedic relief. Man.
Those were the good
But,
days. No. Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to a degree, I think there was. I do remember when there was moments when DAI was not doing too hot. I just was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, this is
I was
literally.
arbitrage a lot. Yeah.
I was just like, I am going to cheaply pay my debt right now. Like, and I tried to, and I paid back. Like, I remember buying DAI at like 97, 96 cents or something. I remember for a very brief time, and just paid back my debt. I was just like, yeah, 4% discount, I'll take it. But then, if you think about it, that arbitrage worked because that meant I was buying DAI, and DAI's price had to go up because there's a buy demand, right? So, did it work? I guess I don't know. But then there was like more of those crazier like algorithmic stable coins that are, gosh, like those are wild. Those are like I can say in fairness, I've lost my share of money putting it into a something like Luna before, and I've lost my Uniswap airdrop because of that because I was a dumbass. So lesson learned, like it's. But yeah, that's why I think I stay away from these things. That's a 10-foot pole. So
real question. I wonder how many people actually held on to that Uniswap airdrop. I know I didn't, unfortunately.
Don't.
No, yeah, I think the smart people dumped it at the right time, right?
Hmm.
I mean, like, I don't feel like any of these DeFi tokens have performed that well this bull market. Am I wrong?
None of them
Right?
really did. Like Matic got up to 2. I should have dumped like it, but I didn't, like an idiot. So I thought it would go to 5, like everyone else.
Yeah.
So that's what happens.
Yeah. Well, this is time where we really learn a little bit about ourselves along the way. I feel like bear markets is quick.
Yeah. Well, I think now for us, because we're actually crypto native, like fully off the salary, addiction of USD, we actually have
Dude.
to sell it now. Dude, there's no more fucking around. We actually have to sell at the top. Like,
Dude, I did an ACH transfer, just like the biggest ACH transfer I've ever done in a very long time, and I've done like wires and everything, whatever, to Uncle Sam. And I was routing for the first time in 4 years, I was actually routing fiat to crypto, which I've just never done in a while. And I was like, wait, this takes 5 days to settle me USDC? I'm like, what is this backward ass shit?
My
Like,
God.
I was just like, I'm so used to now where like, I've there's like for example, AngelList, right? Like you get to invest with AngelList. They accept USDC, right? Like that to me, so it's like it's kind of wild. Like I'm already like it's like a weird presence of mind where it's just like, to me, USDC is the normal, right? Like fiats and how fiats are settled is so foreign and so archaic now to me. Like if when AngelList came up, it's like you can use Anchorage to transfer USDC. Like that was immediately the only option I was willing to do. Like
yeah. I mean, actually, wire transfer is so backwards. It's like beaming money into the void and then hoping it actually lands because it goes through Fedwire system, right? Fedwire is pretty fuzzy in terms of how they do shit. It's literally, have you seen the goddamn wire form? It's like, what the fuck? This is how we send money around the world?
Yeah.
Doesn't even make
it's
sense.
Broken.
Yeah, like it's so fucked.
Yeah.
On the note of protocols, guys, I wanted to ask you both what you guys know about Near protocol. From what I understand about Near myself is that they're their own layer 1. And they're building a layer 2 with a EVM on that layer 2 called Aurora, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know a lot about it. I'm wondering if you guys know anything about that protocol.
I know some of my friends from BitPay were associated with them, the Shrub Finance guys. I think Near Protocol is giving out a lot of developer grants and just kind of throwing money around this whole year, kind of trying to get something to stick. But to me, my impression of it is just like any other thing, like AVAX, Avalanche, or whatever, where they're trying to appeal to the different virtual machines. So.
I remember way back their big thing was their big go-to-market strategy was like built by developers for developers kind of a vibe. They're trying to like sound cooler than EVM deving, where we have all the best tools, we have all the best stuff, right? Which I don't know if it. I don't think it worked, but it feels like that also reflected upon the fact that they had a massive fund, and certainly us as the studio, we have been approached by the Near Protocol team saying, "Do you want free money to build on Near?" And we're like, it's just like we had a preference to stay on an EVM chain. And I mean, I've played around with loosely. I have a wallet somewhere with Near. At the time, it was a pretty crappy experience. I'm certainly thinking it's better now, but I feel like what's not going for it, in a very jaded way to say this, is what's not going for it is they don't have A16Z. Like, they need a sugar papa coming along and willing to endlessly pump and invest in businesses building on Near. And Solana has that.
Like
that.
Yeah, it's
You
very
need you need a
unfortunate.
sugar daddy to make these things work, I think.
Yeah, I actually kind of find it distasteful that protocol development is so it's so startup like at this point, right? It's all VC funded. It's all like it's all VC funded in one way or the other. Really, the only original protocols that are developed by like normal people is Bitcoin and Ethereum. There's nothing else, right?
Hmm.
Literally nothing else. And I don't think we'll ever. It's unfortunate that we will never probably see that again.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a chat with a friend of mine just yesterday at night, and he was asking me, and it was just like, so what's the point? Like he works in Web3 now, right? So just recently, and he's like, he was asking, he was like, so what do you think Web3 really means, right? Like what like people are telling me it's like owning the internet, right? But I thought about it, I was like, well, VC still own the internet. Like that status quo hasn't
Yeah,
really fundamentally changed, right? like
in any
but you can.
capacity, yeah,
I
not
also
at all.
genuinely do believe, like, this is me being paranoid. Is I do think there's a psyops campaign by a lot of the VCs to perpetrate the meme that like it's a owned internet by everybody, but really
Hundred
I
percent,
don't really think it
100%.
is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. This
But
Web3
I
term is very hijacked, like completely.
yeah, and so I kind of was thinking about it, and I was like, well, if I were to really break it down to the core, it feels like Web3, and if it's in its truth values, it's like one thing I feel like you can't compromise to still have Web3 is you got to be able to rage quit any system that you participate in, where like
Hmm.
you cannot be having a Celsius level issue, right? Like where I cannot participate because a very small body of people decided. Oh, we lost Ash. A small body of people decided that this is for the community that we're going to freeze our money, right? Like
Right.
you got to be able to
That's
lead the
bullshit.
system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You got to be able to leave the system at any time. You got to have the freedom to enter the system anytime. You have to have the freedom of being allowed in and out, dependent to your ability to provide utility through that protocol, right? Which,
Right.
whatever that is, right? So, in rage quitting, that implies indirectly that your identity has to be decentralized, right? Like, if you can't really rage quit if a centralized entity owns your identity, right? Like, because they control if you actually get to rage quit, really, then, right? So if you get to rage quit, that means you need to have a decoupling of your financial personality to your real world personality, right? Which is allowed through addresses, right? And then you can wipe your cache with Tornado protocol to keep it clean if you really have to. But like, to me, at the end of the day, we're going to lose a lot of battles into this decentralization effort in Web3.
Yeah.
And I feel like the one battle we can't lose is being able to leave and enter the system at our own will without having to look up to a certain team or group of people that we don't know what they're doing behind closed doors to participate in, right? Like if Compound goes to hell, at least there's like a 6-day lock period that allows us to leave the system, right? Like
Right.
we have a rage quit opportunity predicated that you're educated enough to know that event happens, right? So like yeah, like that like I just kind of had a moment that to realize just like like I've been in DeFi for a bit. I was like I kind of thought it was like, what are we all fighting for still? Like well, like we had the ambitions, I think, in the early times where it was about building a new internet financial system where it was felt democratized, flat owned. But in our romanticism, we didn't really see just honestly aggregation theory, power theory, that like power still always accumulates, right? And we see that now in Web3, power accumulated. And so it's just like now it's like I had to ask, I had to really think about it. It was like, so what is Web3? If power theory still always holds true, people with power tend to get more power. Yeah, and I do think rage quitting is the big thing that if we lose that, then we're not really that much better than traditional internet power systems, right? Like,
Right.
and so I don't know. Yeah, like it.
Yeah, I like so. There's a lot of focus right now on this like idea of exporting your
digital identity and stuff like that. But I mean, I think what you're saying is like not being locked up to something. It's like I think especially with the money market stuff, it's only degraded in terms of decentralization since Compound, right? At least Compound was pretty strict in terms like Compound won't randomly freeze things, right? They won't freeze.
They
can't. They can't. Right?
They can't. And so does
and
not.
And that's very different from the current. Yeah, and that's very different from the money markets on Solana, like Solend or pretty much anything else, right? They freeze shit whenever they feel like it. Like Solend freeze for Ethereum.
Yeah, I think correction is they can freeze maybe in the worst case scenario, but it's a time locked freeze. So maybe that's I actually just genuinely don't remember.
But you can't even withdraw though. Like for Solend, I remember when they froze Ethereum, like they froze Ethereum withdrawals and deposits.
Yeah. I remember that too. Like I think that was like that to me, that's like DeFi, but just Fi. It's not even the D part, it's not even silent anymore. It's just Fi.
Just no KYC. That's literally the only difference.
yeah. It's the KYC. I was like, it's not regulated Fi. And I mean, like, if anything we've seen during this whole bear market is the existing DeFi systems are very undervalued. Like the fact that they held strong, no bad debt, things got liquidated, this protocol held strong. Like I don't think there's anything been more of a testament to the current DeFi foundations, right? That we've predicated and built our current universe on, right? Bob stood strong, Compound stood strong. At a technological level, all the AMMs held, right? Like it. I'm not going to comment on slippage things and market things like that, but I mean, things didn't break. Was such a massive
the PSYOP thing you're talking about. Propagate. I mean, it is propaganda in all aspects, pretty much, right? Like what they're all this like the DeFi and NFT stuff is not what makes Web3, right? I mean, you would know more about the history of that Web3 library that when it first came out than I would. But I mean, they just named the library Web3. That's what it was, right? They MetaMask named the library Web3, injected it in from that Chrome extension. It was a good name, right? It was a good name at that time. And what is it actually? All the library is doing is letting you do key signing from your browser, which is a genius concept that we have not even done until 2017. Which is that is the market internet. To be able to do key signing from your browser is the game changer. Truly, that's actually what it is. And we've built on top of it. We've done it not necessarily in a good way. You can do key signing not necessarily with Ethereum. You can do it with anything, right?
Sure.
And so that's what Web3 actually is. And it just got fucking hijacked to shit, basically. Like now we have Web5. We're on Web5 somehow. How'd that happen, right?
Just the world, right? I mean,
seems to be on something with that.
I've so many times thought about what is like, what if NFTs had the word like what if they were not called NFTs? What if they were like DeFi? What if there's like a decentralized part? Like what if the word had decentralized in it, like the acronym instead of NFTs? I was like, that would not have worked. Like because NFTs are not about decentralization. They never work. They genuinely never work. Right. Like NFTs, like I think there's like a genuine gradient you can measure on the success of NFTs. It's like, is this NFT successful due to the private key that created the contract? Because right, if say Yuga Labs create a new NFT, that thing will have 1 ETH minimum floors, right? If it comes out of their private key. Or during the early bull market days, it was about novelty, right? Like if this thing is just net new, we're going to give you enough doubt to allow you to discover a market, right? But in this way, we're seeing in the bull market, it quickly went from like cool new things to who owns which private key, right? Like, like Moonbirds. And at a principle, Moonbirds was successful because of Proof XYZ's organization, right? Propping up an asset. And that's pretty much a private key that gave it value. So it's like, thank for the love of God that we didn't call these NFTs decentralized, because the name would have been so ironic, right? And I remember like when I was one of the few proponents that called DeFi open finance. Like I was consistently using that language, and because I didn't believe decentralized finance was a qualifying term to what I think it really meant, because nothing is actually decentralized, quote unquote, if you think about the power system, but it is a more open system. Like that, what I cared about, right? People can access and leave, predicated upon that you have a private key, that you're safe, and you have money and you have wealth in it, right? Like, but open finance never stuck, and now it's called DeFi, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's like, we're also, I feel like, Ash, we can both feel this so vividly right now. Is like we're just not seeing other random people creating random crazy fun things in NFTs right now.
Yeah,
it just feels
honestly,
like
the lack of innovation is throughout the space. Honestly, it's not just in it. It's like I see the lack of innovation everywhere, across the software in general, in my opinion, really, and it's like somewhat deafening in many aspects. Like we're only now getting like we like this key signing thing is a huge deal that people have been thinking about since PGP days, and we're just getting to it now. And then the best thing we did with it is trade fucking PFPs, like and DeFi and stuff like that. Like they can be so much more than that. You can, you can do cool stuff with even like internet protocols, like there can be all to HTTPS, like there can be all kinds of weird stuff. I think
I mean, when it comes to innovation across, the blockchain sector, I guess, I mean, I do think that there is more innovation happening in the Polkadot ecosystem, maybe.
Polkadot had high looks too.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
what they're building is really cool, and a lot of these chains that they're building have a focus on being EVM compatible through the Moonriver and Moonbeam Foundation, which is also really neat because for the first time we can actually take Kusama or Polkadot related assets and bridge it over to Ethereum. So there's a little bit of innovation happening on that side, even with regard to the world energy markets. A lot of innovation happening with the way we manage energy, and you can see this across the world where there's a massive focus on sustainability. There's, the World Economic Forum announced this year like $130 trillion initiative focused on green initiatives. It's a lot of capital to be pulled in. And so I could see, and this was with a blockchain organization that actually spoke, Energy Web actually spoke at the World Economic Forum on this subject matter as well. And so there is innovation happening, but it's outside of our world. It feels like it's outside of the world of NFTs. It's outside of Ethereum.
I would argue
now, and yeah,
still slow, in many aspects. Like I would argue that even energy innovation is slow because there hasn't been that much focus on it. There's been focus on like shifting to green technology, but actually developing new green technology in better ways.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and you're right. Like in general, energy is going to be slow because it's the most, probably, if not the most regulated market in the world, right? And then we're going to have, right now, there's a massive focus on like renewable energy credits and taxing carbon and things like that. And so the innovation we're seeing has to do with the concept of
my internet appears to be very unstable for some reason today, but
that's all good. But yeah, I don't know if you caught that. Are you aware of what a renewable energy credit is yet? A REC?
No.
That's an interesting concept worth diving into at some point. We don't need to go into it right now, but basically the premise of it is, they're looking at, taxing your carbon usage and finding a way to subsidize that using renewable energy credits in the form of a token, right? And so in Canada, they've already legislated a price, for example, for carbon at like $170 per ton of carbon usage to be enacted by 2030. And what that means is already they have a way to charge people for their carbon outputs. And with this, there's going to be a whole bunch of other regulations, including reporting. But with a way to charge, you also need a way to subsidize. And so a lot of the work right now feels like it's around creating, subsidies and ways to interact with the energy market, which, back to what you were saying, is indeed moving slow, just given the complexity and the size of that market, right?
It's a good financial instrument to kind of get the wheels turning for these types of, like from a macro scale, I think there's definitely good lessons to look at outside of crypto or software. of problems. You know, it's like, and I think it's commonly known that like there hasn't been that much development on nuclear technology because of the scary incidents that happened in the past, right? With like stuff like that, meltdowns, right? So, but that was generation one, generation two technologies. Like we didn't do anything.
Like if you
since
think
then,
about it,
right?
like the U.S. military has been using nuclear
Yeah,
reactors
they
for
use
quite a while.
mini
Uh,
versions of those on ships, and like, what are we doing,
Yes.
right? And they're able to minimize risk by not using boiling water, right? So they're using stuff like molten salt that does like has a pretty like consistent cool down and expansion properties. And I mean, these are innovations that are very vastly applicable to the civilian population, but we just didn't do it because we're scared, right? So there's a balance of public sentiment and a willingness to actually do something.
oh, here he goes again.
Oh man, I really wanted to hear what he had to say there.
Yeah.
I think he's right though. You know, or let's see if he'll go ahead. Ash, continue.
God damn
Please
it!
do.
All right, what part did I drop off at? Jeez.
You were talking about public sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, basically, the gist of it is we do fuck ourselves over in many aspects. It's not just like I don't see innovation as a linear line. It's never been like that.
So I mean, but so to tie this back all the way to crypto, it's like
Yeah.
like as much as like this is still me being as jaded as I am as a person. The reason I think a lot of us in the beginning of the bear market of Ethereum post ICOs, I think a lot of us had the vision that for Ethereum to grow and be successful, we had to replicate and copy and subsume the old system, right? Where actually the inverse thought was we had to create an all new economy, right? We had to work without the stripping, without the regulatory slash also the pressures and the public sentiment issues trying to fight the old system. We just had to go in and look introspectively saying we had to go pave our way, right? And to that point, the danger of this is always the Icarus effect, right? Is we can go at a sheer speed that causes the degeneracy culture that we see, right? Because everything is just not restricted, right? There's just the sentiment has always been so captured and raptured by the price, right? But to this degree, I still hold very strongly that if you want to see the pace of innovation to the pace that I think observably crypto has defined as one of the fastest ever seen in a very, very, very decentralized main where it's not just through sheer funding willpower of a government. It's more of a reflection of an empty volume that they were able to fill aggressively in. And that's what I think Ethereum seized, right? And I feel like for any of these other chains at the principal bottom is, I don't, especially in the bear market, I don't think the fight is to break the old. It's to find a home where you can power vacuum your way in. And if you don't do that in a speed that makes sense, I think these things on the long term, you'll start losing the mind share to power, right? And I think to a degree, you would argue some of these L2s have done that out of the case that gas fees are very expensive on Ethereum and also not very sustainable to be on there. And I would say Solana's growth is in part because it's pretty freaking fast when it works. It has a lot of the same DeFi replications that you see on EVM, and it has a pretty darn good wallet experience in Phantom, right? Comparatively speaking to MetaMask, and they were able to operate within a sub vacuum that Ethereum left awry, right? In the sense that
they're able to catch up with development very fast.
Yeah, and I do think, and to take it, I do believe that there's a reason why military nuclear power is so, I think, not necessarily advanced, but so stabilized as a field of study. Because I do know that actors there are like, if it ain't broke, we keep it simple, right? Like we upgrade iteratively. We don't do anything too wild. But I do think that's a result of, as you said, effectively a vacuum where public sentiment is shielded away, politicking has been shielded away, and this allowed them to nurture what they needed because they had a technical requirement. We had a big ass super carrier. We got to keep it afloat for 70 years. So this is a means to an end, right? So in my eyes, at a macro level, like if you really want to see the sheer speed of innovation, like it's a matter of choosing the right place to put your battles in, right? And it's when it's a bull market, it doesn't feel like a problem because everybody wants to hear your attention. Everybody wants your ego. But when it's a when it's a bear market and you have nobody to rely on but yourself, a power vacuum allows you to move, right? And I think that's a big part of where DeFi went from 0 to 1 in 2 years. Like we're at a point where, like, I remember when we were at Zerx and we're like, if we can beat the slippage price on Coinbase Pro, that would be heaven. Like, that would have been amazing, right? Like, that was a far cry of a dream. But we're at a point now where AMM has better pricing for certain pairs against certain centralized exchanges, right? And that happened in the span of like 2 years, which is like you there's not a lot of places where such an aggressive disruption toward a system that has so much stickiness to, because liquidity is one of the most sticky things you can ever have in the world, right? Better liquidity usually always invites more better liquidity, because as a liquidity provider, you don't want to be eaten by the slippage, right? So somehow we were able to fight against that, right? And I think, again, it's back down to the vacuum that we were allowed to live in, right? Which now that it seems like it's been pierced a bit because of Luna, maybe we have regulations slowing us down. But like, I'd also say that with the same perspective towards all the L2s and all the other base chains, is like, if they want to operate, they need to find their own vacuum and be safe in it. And two, I do genuinely believe Ethereum benefited a lot from Bitcoin and XRP and all these other coins being price performantly doing really well during that last bull market, because those guys shielded Ethereum from all the degen public bad news. I think it was everybody was chatting on those chains and ICO coins, and Ethereum was just like, we took no flack and we're just going to build, right? And that draw a really healthy community. Like, I was drawn to Ethereum because it felt like a safe place to build, right? It felt like it wasn't getting a lot of flack, right? So yeah, like to me, like, observationally speaking, and at a macro level, that I don't know. It's like my jaded way of saying, like, if we demand an innovation, I think usually is a byproduct of a circumstance that was enabled, right? And we certainly have seen cases where, like, where you can argue the moon landing, where, like, what happened in the moon landing was really the U.S. government pretty much used sheer force of will and money to pave a vacuum for NASA to say, you to guide to the moon and be him back safely, right? Like, and once the money was gone, clearly NASA wasn't able to do what they wanted to do, right? So,
or at least not publicly.
yeah, not publicly.
But that's also the whole world's attention was shifted towards this one thing, right?
Oh gosh, we lost him again.
Usually, yep. There you go.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm gonna ship you an Ethernet cable, dude.
Yeah.
You were saying though?
I don't know what's going on. That's it, pretty much. Whole world. Boom. Looking up.
I kind of want to play devil's advocate for a sec on this notion of innovation, and like step back and think about time and how quickly time moves, and how the internet wasn't really like a public protocol until, what was it, 1996, right? And so what is that now, 26 years ago or something like that, right? I mean, there's been a lot of action in 26 years. And so if we were to look at it, from a perspective, okay, well, what kind of innovation would we see in a decade? I bet you in a decade from now, we'd be looking back and kind of laughing at ourselves, thinking like, we didn't think there was any innovation happening. But
yeah, go ahead, keep going. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was just
Good
thinking
stuff.
Because I mean, we're focused on the space that we work in, and not only that, but like I feel like right now, like, the innovation almost feels like nuanced. Like you're either following the innovation and you understand the nuances of it, or maybe it's just outside of your peripheral vision of what's happening in the space.
Well,
and
like, what I would say, go ahead.
If
it's nuanced, it's not that big, right?
Maybe, but you got to think about it. Like you have, for example, a lot of developers who came from Ethereum and moved on and started building new protocols and new projects with nuances in the way they're building it, these new protocols, because of what they learned building on Ethereum. But a lot of people just stuck to ETH and
Yeah.
didn't necessarily follow these developers for those nuances, but they're still building, right? And so
Yeah.
I feel like maybe it's just a lack of awareness. Some not for
I
all.
I think there's like I think I'm really looking for like 0 to 1 ideas, right? It's like
But
the
that doesn't
way I
happen
always think the
often.
example I
That
think
doesn't
about it's
happen often, right?
like yeah, it doesn't happen often, of course, right? But you want to keep as a species, you want to keep that time frame tight, right? So you're always like pushing forward. Like when I think about the Industrial Revolution, like that was a massive amount of like game life-changing shifts for the entire population happening very, very fast, right? Like
Sure.
like when I think about the way electricity was installed, I mean, one, like even marketing that concept of like getting fucking wires
Well,
installed in an entire city is like crazy.
I'm going to say devil's advocate again is the 0 to 1 was a huge inequality to that era, right? The wealth
Right.
distribution then was horrifyingly bad
It was
compared to even
bad.
now, right? Like 0 to 1ing things in human history certainly looks like we've been doing it at a faster and faster and faster pace, right? Like since like the birth of intellectualism down to where we are now. But every single time it does happen, there is a huge inequality system that has to be played, and there's, for lack of a better way, there has been corrections, and I'm not going to argue if these corrections are good or bad because that could go down to a very, very politically contentious subject matter.
Yeah.
But to a result, right? Like if you think about it, the field of communism as a study is a directive reaction to the Industrial Revolution, right? Like the kind of inequality we saw there due to capital flight or capital movement into industries of scale.
That is correct, but at the same time, we're talking about the product creation, right? So like I'm talking about railroad tracks and electricity. These are things that are mail systems, right? These are things that population regardless of class. Now there was a lot of class problems, but I mean I'm looking at those examples in isolation of all other aspects, right? The time frame of those events happening, electricity, railroad, other shit happening,
Even
engines.
Just like if you look at rail, like and how concentrated that was, right? It was like New York and Chicago that had rail for the longest time because of one rich man, the Vanderbilt family, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
And so like to what Dave's saying, like that was incredibly unbalanced and he sure 0 to 1 that project, but it resulted in an immense amount of inequality. And even if you actually look into that family, I believe at one point it was said that he owned like I think what was it, like $1 out of every $20 bill or something like crazy like that. Like it was just like an insanely skewed like level of wealth that this guy gained, right? And so
so it's a balance of it's basically centralization of resources. Who's actually getting the ability to innovate, the right to innovate, which in the longest time for government has played the choosers of this, right? Of this basically. Versus the actual innovation itself, which fundamentally someone has to do it, right? Before there was no rail between New York and Chicago. Afterwards there was, which was beneficial in some aspect, right?
So I've always deeply questioned the innovation myth about humanity. And I don't think it was humanity's necessary destiny to be a species like what we have today. I do think it's a revelation from the Christian cultures. Because I do think there has been a lot, and we've seen this in a lot of civilized smaller cultures, like especially I think some of the indigenous communities in Americas, that and also other indigenous communities. Like if it wasn't for a Christian concept of owning land, of all these more power based thoughts, they were the birthplace of a thought of we gotta do better, right? We gotta be better. We gotta do what we did before better today, right? And I think that maybe it's natural selection that kind of culture became the predominant human culture, that we have to push forward because such a culture can adapt faster, can change, towards the concerns of the world, and 3 also subjugate other cultures more easily, right? Like maybe it's more of a natural selective behavior. Maybe that is, like, if you would play the game theory out in a simulation, maybe that's always the case. A culture that has a pride towards innovation is the one that always wins, right? Like it has the predominant sentient school of thought. I don't know, right? Like it.
Right. Without diving too deep into it, though, perhaps indigenous communities might not be the great example because it wasn't through innovation; it was through sheer force.
Yeah, and I think that it wasn't like I say innovation in the sense that it's a derivative of the power ideas of these cultures. Where, like, I think once you have the idea of owning land, it you know, I think a lot of innovations were before fueled by war, right? By the need to subsume other land, right or wrong, whatever that means, right?
Computing was invented due to war, right? And I mean, Reaper will touch on that concept. Well, I mean, it's a reality that we have to remember, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm talking on my own ass. I don't know any of this, to be honest. I'm a DeFi degen, so I could just be totally wrong right now what I'm saying.
It is interesting to consider what you're saying, though. Like, I don't get into it too often, but I come from an indigenous community in the high Arctic with an indigenous background myself. And within the last 50 years, we've seen pretty much exactly what you're talking about. We've seen people come in and completely change the way things are managed here based off of their own individual endowed power, be it from wherever they got it. And they came in and implemented a whole bunch of different things that, did result in innovations. But it was really messy, really, really messy.
Yeah.
And perhaps going in and just invading a land and then restructuring it is like the most intense example of 0 to 1 that we could find, right? You know?
Yeah. Painful.
I mean, if you, right, like one of the biggest, I think 0 to 1, if you think in that sense, was like probably the Japanese occupation by America at post World War II. Like that was such a seismic shift of a culture, right? Like that was wild what General MacArthur did. He took land and redistributed it. Women got to vote, right? Reduced the samurai culture down to an artifact of what it used to be, right? Implemented a democracy that pretty much removed all strength in the monarch, right? And then did it in a very, very fast pace of time. Like, holy cow, that was fast, right? And certainly that was in part because they needed a democratic institution in the Pacific to fend off the communists.
Hold weapons, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. Like they I remember I forgot who joked to me when they're drunk. It's like MacArthur was literally commanding an unsinkable aircraft carrier during his occupation of Japan, which is very derogatory, but like I think it, I don't know. One way to say it
reflects their attitude. It perfectly reflects the American attitude at that time, I would say.
Cold War fears was, well, I guess that, I'm too young to have felt even the last bit of the Cold War. So I think, are we all too young for it? Maybe.
Yeah. I think it's past before our time.
But as far as I understand is that the Cold War did spur quite a bit of computational innovation, right? Like, it seems like some of them are militarily inspired, but I guess the internet in some ways was wasn't it a military project right in the beginning, ARPANET. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious example, I mean, World War II is like we just invented computers purely to crack other people's messages. That was the only reason. And then we were like, oh, fuck, we can do more shit with this. And then here we are.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider the advancements that actually follow periods of war, like even civil wars, massive revolutions in the way we think and change things, and the technologies we use. And I mean, like, World War II was also like an incredible period for planes. Like, like aviation took right off after World War II. Like there's a whole bunch of different examples you can give out there.
I mean,
It,
we could say that about the Ukrainian conflict, right? Like drones and their perpetration of drones to do surveillance and target has been obscene. And to a degree, even how Zelensky is using social media to put the war on his side, at least in Western democracies, right? Like control the narrative in that way, right? Like, those are pretty new concepts, I think, for modern conflicts at a peer-to-peer conflict level, right? Like where you're fighting your peer rivals, right? Like I've certainly seen footage of like spy drones flying and with like a little phone, and they're like, all right, now I know where certainly this contingent of occupying forces are, and they react with military responses, certainly, right? But like, yeah, that's cool, and not cool. Sorry, not cool. Not that's new, right? And right, there's also like I think this was the first time I think the public got to know that like apparently America made like suicidal drones, like switchblade drones that they're called, but like they sit in the sky and wait for a target, and then they just go down and like detonate on you,
right?
Which that's apparently they had that for a very long time, and then we just finally heard it in the limelight.
I guess there was like over. Oh, actually, go ahead, Dave.
This reminds me where I totally recommend this, especially to you, Ash. I think there's going to be a lot of good ideas. There's a Reddit called r/hyr, I think. It's like I'm gonna have to look it up right now. Because I've been exploring it over the last week or two, but it's kind of like SCP, but it's like a repository of stories about humans in sci-fi, but told in a way that humans are overpowered.
Okay,
universes where humans are like broken good, and then and I remember reading one of these, or not just like humans are good. It's like the humans are just like pretty pretty smart, and they just like outsmart the aliens or whatever, outsmart the sci-fi universe. And then so I've been reading one of these things where they're like talking about how like the human species got so overpowered that they are part of some kind of federation government with other aliens, but the other aliens think that the humans are super peaceful, right? Like they're super diplomatic, so they don't ever think the humans are a threat. But it is like later revealed in the story that the humans were so powerful at a point and controlled every other alien race so much that they actually erased their violent history in every of the other subsequent cultures and made them think that they were actually docile animals, right? It was just like, I don't know. I just found that to be such a different interpretation of sci-fi that reflects upon like humans being like innovators at hearts and absurd creators in that sense. And so I don't know, I recommend it's a fun place to read stuff, and there's reads where just talking about because we always see sci-fi that just pits humans as like the underdogs, right? But in this sense it was about let's flip the formula, which I think brings a lot about our understanding of ourselves more than even putting us as the underdog story, because the underdog story has been kind of heard again and again and again, right? So I just I had a blast reading it. I'm trying to find a subreddit right now so I can share it to you guys. The stories are very thought-provoking, but in a way that I think really about innovation and where are we going, right? So
wouldn't you guys agree that in general we are the underdogs? Like if you look at the technology and the resources that are out there, and the let's say what would you call them, like the controllers, like the people who control that technology and the people who really hold the power, like scale's pretty tilted in their favor. And so wouldn't you argue that the average individual, the 90% of humanities, are indeed the underdogs, and if we're to do anything, conquer the universe and go out and even interact with another civilization. I mean, we're the underdogs, and we probably still would be, because it would probably be the controllers doing such things. Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't changed through all of history.
Yeah,
don't see
not
it
at all.
changing anytime soon. So, I mean, in that sense, it's like I would be hard pressed to even use the argument of underdog at this point. It's the status quo. Like that is it. We never seen anything else ever before.
That sucks.
At the scale of at the large scale, right? So we don't even know what not
Yeah.
the current status quo is, right? So in a comparative way, how can we compare towards that, right? Like to that, whatever that I guess you would argue utopic state would be. But as far as I see it, right, like if industries of scale exists, aggregation will happen, right? Like
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And you know, it seems like the most successful cultures are the ones that value aggregation, right? I mean, I'm gonna stop here. I don't even know where I'm coming out of my ass.
Yeah. Like I was gonna say, like, I think for humans is to aggregate, right? I think because we're intelligent species, we tend to action of ants toward aggregation and stuff, power higher. But I think what makes us human is our ability to fight against that. I think it's imperative as that we are mindful of going the opposite direction and a ratio, you know, because that is the tendency, right? Look at our society right now, right? Things are being run by algorithms, and like it's only getting more central. We're only going more in a direction of ants, hive mind, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think this one chance kind of things slowly.
I don't think it's gonna be a reverse. It's gonna be a sandbag. That's my very, very, very.
That's it. I agree with that. That's the best we can do right now is sandbag. But we have to be mindful of this concept, right? Because if we're not thinking about it, then we're gonna get fucked.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Sooner, you know, so at some point it's gonna happen, right?
I've always thought, I genuinely still think about it, is like, how many people today's livelihood was because an algorithm decided to put their content before somebody else's. Right? Yeah. Like, I think a lot of the TikTok quote unquote stars of today, it seems like some of them are intelligent designed, as in like you played the algorithm towards your favor. But I feel like a lot of them was to the whims of some engineers from UC Berkeley built an algorithm that identifies economically positive values, which means like ratios, views, and how those are valuable to the network, the social media platform, and built a system that skews to it, right? And yeah, I don't know. I always think about that. It's just like how much of us is this intelligent, and through the result of a lot of it. But you know, not to discredit any of these people. Most of these people had to seize the opportunity that the algorithm gave them effectively, right? They had to grow a business all of a sudden, right? So that's a lot of work. That's hard work, right? And couldn't we say that to a fault, Proof of Beauty was the result of certain Twitter stuff and YouTube stuff picking up at the right time, right? Like, so, you know, we're here fighting our hearts out, right, to run a good business, hopefully in the long run. But I don't know. It just makes me really wonder about the power of it all. You know, like the power of that code, right? Like, not even the person who made it, but the code, right? Like that random whatever Rust file on GitHub right now deployed on EC2, right? Like that thing, that thing at the whims of it can make you really rich or not rich. Yeah, I don't know. It's like more of an absurdist thought in my head, thinking about just the absurdity of it all. right?
Yeah, I mean,
Love
it's
to.
it's been whole day. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Ash. I'll hold my question.
It's just it's been a whole decade of SEO, right? It's like if your business is on the second page of Google, you're not a real business, basically, right? I mean, this is
That's pretty true.
reality. This is a crazy world, right? I think it's just something we have to remember. It's like what's really going on here.
Yeah, I may do an argument. Wouldn't you say just like crypto just like make simpler algorithms that like are publicly technically all available? Right? Like it, we measure things to a quality of just simpler rules of why things are successful. But the key thing is now everybody knows what those rules are, and nobody can modify the rules to their favor, right? And then we all come to the same playground and play, right? And some people play better than others, right? But it still feels like to me it's still like an algorithm relationship, right? But like then I think about it, it's like if you search a definition of an algorithm, isn't that like how most humans have played out through the generations? It's like somebody figured out the rules more than the other person, and congrats, the system rewards you, and now you're really rich or powerful, whatever it is, right? Like, so I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to pick both your brains, more like off-topic question. I'm curious what both your opinions are on the rise of AI, and we have a whole bunch of different kinds of AIs being created and rising, and we're talking about code being powerful, and I can't help but think about anything more powerful than an AI that is aggregating all the information, and we have to do kind of what you were saying, Dave, and just kind of like work around or step back and work around that AI. I'm curious what you guys both individually think about the rise of AI and what's happening, and I guess like the step towards like the actual fourth industrial revolution, as they call it.
Well, at a strictly utilitarian stage in the technology.
I'm curious to know your thoughts. Yeah.
I still as a tool, as a means to an end that, as any tool is, can be used very poorly and very slipperily, and I think that's where we are. Really, I think modern AI is just, to a degree, is honestly just linear algebra applied again and again and again and again and again and again until you get a meaningful pattern that works. If you do it at a sufficient amount of level, you get something sufficiently advanced. And certainly I am diluting the work of a lot of people doing research and innovations. And I've certainly had a lot of friends who do that too. And also the folks that found applications of it, right? It's to that point, as a means to an end, I don't really have a problem with it as a tool in our tool belt. But I don't think we as have thought about it in a more fleshed out way. Tool. Like it feels like every startup organization considers it as this is our IP and super formula to success. Where I think there's certainly more of a need to understand of as a system, what does it actually cause in us, right? And also too is it's one of those things like it's like in some ways it feels like it's like humans couldn't figure out the game theory of solving this problem and translate it in logic. So what did we do? Is we just made a system that kept on trying it until it got it right. And that's an AI model. We train it up, right? And to that point, I do think that we kind of black box a little bit of that game theory, of that design that led to whatever its predictive systems are. And so when we only can analyze the output and the inputs and not necessarily how the neurons are wired, and actually have a comprehensive understanding of like, why does it signal in these ways? It creates a very hard picture for, I think, a human mind, a human consciousness to look at it and empathize and understand how to use it in a way that makes sense. Because then now we're in a place where everything seems to be like an AI solution problem. And if that's the case, we're seeing very vividly in social media the negative after effects of creating a system that we humans can't really fully understand, how it's actually producing the output it is producing, right? And I don't think we humans can, to be honest, but I do think that there's certainly a lot of work that we need to be doing to understand what we unleashed. And I think that's where I have a degree of hesitancy towards a lot of modern designs of these systems, right? And I certainly have a lot of critique towards like Facebook feeds, YouTube recommendation systems, and all that stuff, right? And yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're not. To me, it's not really artificial intelligence. This is intelligence that we don't understand.
Yeah.
It's just foreign intelligence to human, right?
Yeah, it's just algorithms. I mean, that's my perspective on AI. It's like the term is somewhat disingenuous. It's really just fancy algorithms. That's really more special than we've already been doing. I mean, Google by its search algorithm by its is complex and is doing. So I mean, these things are getting better, and I mean, a lot of it has to do with computing resources. That's enabling it. But I mean, the way I see it is like, yeah, I mean, to David's point of it's a black box. It's essentially like, every company different engines because it just came out. Like the fact that you can make engines, there's not enough mechanics in the world. Like barely any mechanics, and so nobody knows what the fuck's going on inside there. Even the people who build it. So, yeah. So I think it takes time, like for these, basically for the algorithms to get much better and more precise and things like that. I mean, I'm actually looking forward. I mean, there's gonna be lots of problems that will be unsolvable without these types of algorithms. I really think that's what we should just call them. It's like a classification of like how you're doing the solution, and we're just using the term AI for it. But I don't think it should be like thought of as a completely net new thing.
I do genuinely believe in some ways that, as you said, as an algorithm class, it was a directive reaction to, I think, a very long time of humans not being able to push the boundaries of game theory and our understanding of game theory. And that we, especially with, genuinely with the internet, like we got some new data, but like to a point where we just didn't have in history, which is not the default of humans, it's just how humans are. Yeah. We just didn't have opportunities to play to a complex set of rules and understand.
There wasn't enough data.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Not enough data and not enough computing resources. Like the AI winters are a very real thing because AI research really started before pre-internet, all that shit. They were doing this stuff in the 70s pretty much. But all that work kind of froze after that because there was like, well, shit, we can't really do anything.
Yeah.
For the most part.
So indirectly, I do hope that crypto is such a big sandbox for game theoretic studies that we can hopefully push a little harder on effectively humanism a bit, where like if you predicate upon the right rules, it actually does solve the problem that you want to solve, that a more black box algorithm can also give you an output to, right? But to do that is first very capital intensive without a sandbox, and two is probably politically impossible, right? So, and also three is when you don't have money on the line, when incentives are too weak for a human to want to participate, you do need a more algorithmic system to effectively become, now I come to realize it's an automatic market maker in some ways. These AI black boxes, especially recommendation, they're AMMs because the market liquidity couldn't be sustained through a more peer-to-peer human-based system, right? Like they needed something that can automate the pairing of a consumer and a demand and its supply, right? Like that's kind of in some ways what it is, right? And so I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly not happy with how social media is using AIs to do things that I feel very disingenuous to the population. And then, and it feels a little bit like we kind of open a black box that we don't know exactly what it can do. But then I say that with a deep irony because that's literally what we do in crypto. Is we open game theoretic boxes and then we will only realize months later this whole thing is a piece of crap, right? Like and then we lost a lot of money, right? That's what we do for a living in crypto, right? Like, so what am I to say to critique that? But like, I don't know, in a roundabout ways. Like I've previously done some neural net stuff. I have a lot of friends who do a lot of AI stuff, and I don't know. It feels like in some ways I know that the public media loves to shit on these stuff, but in some ways I can see the parallels drawn from them to us in our crypto. Like we're mad scientists doing mad things, and we try our best to do always the right thing. At least hopefully in the culture majority we all do the right thing, but it's like I don't think we usually innovate in a way that's purely positive as a human race. There's always artifacts that we can't comprehend until it happens. So,
yeah. I mean, the way I think about it is like human innovation is 1-to-1 to market volatility, in my opinion. I mean, the fact if a market's not volatile, it should tell you that something weird's going on, in my opinion, right? Like the whole concept of what's it called, quantitative easing by Federal Reserve. Like quantitative easing, they're trying to make it like, smoothing out volatility basically, right, over time. But humans don't innovate like that. We're volatile by nature, right?
I mean,
we have really stupid fun. You go back and forth. It's not That's my perspective.
Would I be too blanket to say a lot of innovation was the spurring of a crisis of thought, where you thought the status quo was this, but something of an event happened that shattered that view? Right. Like I think it's maybe too blanket of a statement, but it certainly feels like, I mean, wouldn't you argue crypto was a reaction to the 08's reaction? Not to say it's a direct correlation, but more so it's like, certainly I think its early community in the cypherpunk movement and even current modern DeFi is reeling from that reaction, right, of that crisis of faith loss. And I do think that this bear market that we've now placed ourselves in due to Luna and everything will certainly spawn a lot of folks who are sitting there thinking, what the fuck were we doing, right? And because of that spirit, we may see a modern change in our DeFi that we know today in a way that promotes something different that may address what we've seen already, right? Maybe that's also where we're already seeing the stirrings of it, but we're not seeing the actual result of it yet because it takes time to build, right? Who knows, right? Like, couldn't we also say that isn't the studio in some ways a huge reaction? Like, isn't Proof of Beauty a huge reaction to modern NFTs? Like, it's in every single way. I think we're rebellious against it. We hate just creating a JPEG, right? A JPEG pointer, right? We don't do that here, right? Yeah. And I think in some ways we were spurred by a thought that we could do better, right?
Yeah, and we've been working in crypto for a long time and have had our own large list of gripes, right? So I mean, in many aspects, I see the work we're doing as a reaction to that as well, right? It's a rejection of we're bullshit we had to deal with, level, essentially, right? Yeah,
we're doing it at a technical level and an artistic level and at a cultural level. Yeah, and I think that does genuinely spur the best work. I genuinely believe that that's the case, where the best work comes from deep emotional states where
being pissed, yeah.
And like I remember when I built London initially, it was a reaction to the gas wars back then, right? The concepts of these NFTs having massive gas wars. I was like, screw that. I'm going to create a token that inverses that thought, that if you do a gas war, it's not beneficial, right? But then obviously there was a London thing that we eventually built the meme more closely towards, right? But I do remember, I don't even know if it's still on the original website, but it was on the original website where I wrote, this project is a reaction to something that I was very frustrated with. And there's an argument to say ABF is a reaction. So is Reaper, right? Towards a state of the current market. So yeah, like I feel like that is our business model, is to critique, is to react, right? And in reaction, I think we are one of the few studios or organizations that demands the challenge, that we don't react in shit posting on Twitter, just that, right? We react in a way that is more, I think, fully formed, right? Through hard work and through the form of well, not to say to discredit those people. They do, like, even the ones that are like more valuable in the sense that like they do Twitter Spaces, whatever. They have a place for them, right? Those reactions, but we also have a home here, right? And so I to a degree, it's like comparing, like a news anchor reacting to modern, like, post-terror world towards, or compared that to a Nolan film, or not the Nolan film, the Batman, the one of the Joker, right? That is, and in some ways, a critique towards like the post-terror world that 9/11, I think, perpetrated to a degree, right? But in some ways, like, I would qualify both, like a news anchor reacting to the 9/11 crisis and that as both very, very strong, valid presentations of human thought, right? And I think just as a studio, I do genuinely personally believe that the NFT market sorely lacks the more patient, artistically put together critiques, and I think that's where we're hoping to fill a gap, right? Because there's so many influencers that are doing it in the moment, but I think we hopefully will fill a huge cultural vacuum, right? That's my goal, right? I think we all share that to some degree, right?
Yeah. And then, I mean, I would provide a little bit of my color on that. Is like, I think if anybody's listening and wondering why are we talking about this stuff, I mean, really think like no one else, everyone, like kind of a type situation, or it's just simply a distribution mechanism for some kind of static art, right? I mean, we want to do this for 10 years. We quit our jobs to do this. We were doing like standard.
And to be fair, we were also given job opportunities to not do this as well, right?
To not do this and do something else. So we got lots of those, and they would have been directly working on DeFi or something of the sorts. We already had it, right? But why didn't we do this? I mean, it comes down to like the philosophy of creation and like and all the stuff we just talked about today, right? Like the gripes with overall things, not just NFTs or anything. I think the two projects we're working on now will truly redefine and more explicitly show who we actually are in many aspects. I think that's why we're so excited and we keep talking about it. I mean, this will be cementing. It will be like a stamp for each of us. Like this is who we are.
I 100% agree. I think the last two projects, in some ways, we were kind of tame, and I think these two projects are really going to feel a lot more like this is from the heart.
100%.
And to that degree, I can't qualify to say that these projects will be very successful, but it, in so many ways, I think artistically, I hope they're complete when we do release them. That it feels like we got our thought across, right? And we dared to do it, right? Like that to me is also half the battle to a degree, right? Like, we're also operating in a world where we just don't see any more people doing crazy crap like us, right? Like it, and now we're still. I don't think we internally have ever had a question of doubt. It was like, should we be doing things differently? No, we've been, I think, very steadfast in our own culture that like everybody else is dropping like flies, but not to say that there's there's no more other creators but us. There are, and we value you as well. But this is our fight. We want to fight it out, and to a point, like I think also all the other ideas we have, the inspiration. Certainly I think sometimes people would critique us in the sense that like, is this a sound business strategy, right? Like I've heard that from some people in the very beginning, but like to that point, we're like, well, and over the 10 years span, as we want people to look back at these projects in a way that feels like these were epics within the history of this movement, and I think to that we're not perfect operators, right? And I've certainly made way too many mistakes along the way going with the IPs that I've shepherded to where they are, and I'll say the same thing about the future things, right? ABF, we're gonna have a lot of things that excite me, but also is gonna piss me off royally, and Reaper is gonna be the same case. The merge, when that happens, same exact case, but I find that to be the core thing that I think keeps our motivation or our North Star so steady as a studio and as an organization. I don't know if you feel that way in that MASH as well, because we previously never were that market fluctuating before. Like we never kind of caught the winds of a new market activity. We're like, we got to do it. We did. So we always been like, everybody's moving in this way, and we're the two random dumbasses on the playground making sandcastles while everybody else is like playing tag or something, right? There's always been this weird, crazy energy that we got going. But I think this allows us to stay resolute in these markets, and I certainly know that we're really fighting hard to make ourselves more resolute every day, right? And I do think these two projects will usher in the new proof of beauty, and ideas and its thoughts and its lessons that we have learned. And I think with that, we're growing, right? We're going to be growing in that way, and I'm also very excited what we'll learn, because that will usher in the next growth phase. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
definitely have like growing pains, like learning from how people even view the way we're doing things now, because it is going to be like, like a very noticeable pivot in many aspects, right? It's like even the way we're approaching Reapers, like it can look like cheesy or even pretentious to an extent, right? But there's a good reason why we're kind of going about things in a certain way, and as one is a differentiator, and two is like, I think the beyond, in almost indescribable way, beyond what people is right now. I think that's really our goal, right?
And
so I mean, it's hard to even explain.
I mean, not to toot our own horn, I think what we're trying to do is also dare to try in a way that if it screws up, hopefully other people don't follow us in that way again, right? Yeah, it's like, it's I think in some ways, I think as a studio, we'll continually be the 0 to 1ers. I think the guys will take something from 1 to 100 and properly scale it. Maybe it will be us in the future, but I don't certainly think we're in a place where we can do that right now. But we also, I think, have a culture and the backlog of ideas that all feel so 0 to 1 in such a way that we'll dare to challenge. But I think people will. I think there'll be days where I really hope for days where people say they were inspired by the beauty IP, and they created a subsequent project that iterated on the lessons that we learned and the mistakes that we made doing that effort, and see something more, right? And so, yeah, I mean, to that point, I've so many people when there was like a moment where I accidentally told somebody I work in NFTs, and then that person's, I think, respect for me dropped from already a low to a new all-time low. And so basically, I thought about it. It was just like, I don't know how to explain to you that we're trying to be different, and I think the keyword is trying. It's our fight, and I think we all know, and I think we all know here that every step of the way, we always are fighting that call to do it. I think every decision we make has always stemmed out of how do we do things the proof of beauty way, right? Whatever that means, right? It's going to be wild. I think ABF in my head has went through so many iterations of its state of what it is. And it's a challenge. It's crazy to do it. And I think I know that Reaper is mentally younger project, but I'd be very surprised if Reaper, when it comes out, is the same Reaper that we started with. I think it will be very different in a way that maybe not the technical levels of changes, but I think spiritually it may learn a lot through the signal, right? So
Well,
Yeah.
guys, that's 90 minutes. I mean, I couldn't really think of a better place to end it off like that. There's some great insights from both of you on, the 2 projects you have coming out. I'm wondering if either of you guys want to add some closing remarks here.
Stay tuned.
There's a puzzle.
These
for
projects
Reaper.
are. Yep, there's a puzzle. Yeah, stay tuned. I think both projects will have same but different audiences. I think is that a good way to say? I think AVF will have a certain draw to a
Very
certain
similar.
group of people, right? They're both very not intellectual, but they take brain cells kind of projects. As in, like, you don't just go in and ape. It
takes some effort.
It's something
that's really.
It takes some effort to have some fun. Yeah.
The effort is the key theme for this year, I think. Effort.
Yeah.
You work for it.
Yeah, we're making you work for it, right? It's not just proof of beauty; it's proof of work. Now we can rebrand our studio. So.
That's hilarious. Love it.
Yeah, so we're slowly revealing them what they are as they get closer. So stay tuned. Especially if you can follow those Twitters. Everything about those will be on those Twitters. So.
Yeah. And if you guys haven't realized already, Proving Beauty Podcast is definitely the best place to get the inside scoop on what we're working on, the things on the go. I know both you guys have been pretty open on this podcast to talk about the things that you're currently building and still learning about and gathering information about, which is really cool. So if you guys are listening to this, this is an awesome place to gather information on what's happening in the POB ecosystem. And like they said, stay tuned. There's so many amazing things on the go.
Yeah. Awesome. We do Wildman.
Awesome.
Cool. So let's call it.
Yeah. Great podcast.